So, for this month's training, we're going to do a review of professional boundaries, the relationship between our caregivers and our clients. So, during this video, we're going to review what professional boundaries are, how do we keep our relationships helpful, not harmful, how we stay in bounds, and why boundaries are so important in the healthcare industry as caregivers. So, professional boundaries. Boundaries are guidelines that keep our relationships with our clients positive and helpful. Boundaries can also help you avoid misunderstandings, any stress or misconduct while you're in the workplace. You should always look for signs that you're crossing any boundaries with your clients so that you can make sure that you maintain those professional boundaries and keep your life personal and professional very separate. So, power and control. A lot of people may assume that the power is with our clients because they control whether we come into their house or that we can service them. But the truth is, a lot of power rides with our caregivers. We control a lot of our clients' information. We are taking care of people that are sick and vulnerable, and that's why there are departments and places out there like APS that help protect our clients. These are people in vulnerable situations that may be sick or lower income that may need people's assistance. So you coming in as a caregiver and having control over their care, how well they're taken care of, gives you a lot of power when you're working with these individuals. So we always must be respectful of that and understanding of that so that we can form good therapeutic relationships with our clients. So anytime we're servicing our clients, we always want to ask the question, am I doing something that is helping me, or am I doing something that's going to help my client? You always want to keep that in the back of your mind whenever you're doing services for your client, whenever you're helping your client, because if the answer is that you're doing something that's helping you, you might be crossing a boundary, a professional boundary, and that is something that could definitely get you into trouble later. So you just want to be mindful of that when you're providing care. So a lot of times when we look at this, we always want to look at like if we're getting too involved with our client or if we're under involved with our client. You want to be somewhere in the middle. You don't want to be overly involved with your client where you know all of their personal information, where you're involved in their decision making, things like that. But you also don't want to be under involved with your client, which means that you're not empathetic towards what they need and what they could use to help them. Your helpful zone should be somewhere in the middle where you care about your client and you're empathetic to their needs, but that you also let all of their decisions ride with them, that you're not overly involved in their lives and they're not overly involved in yours, that you can work, do your job fully at your place of work and their home, but then be able to leave and go back to your own family and be able to care for your family without overly worrying or being stressed out about your workplace. So let's go over some of the different types of boundary crossing that we see quite commonly. We often see these things. These are things that happen with caregivers pretty often. We fall into pitfalls as caregivers. So these are the items that we're going to kind of review today. So one of them is nicknames. Sometimes we get in and we are comfortable with our clients and we've been seeing them for a while, or maybe it's just the way that you were raised in your house that you are comfortable giving people endearments and nicknames. This can be very confusing for clients at times. So you want to make sure that you always address your client the way that they want to be addressed. So even if you've been a caregiver for a long time and you've worked with different clients and you have tons and tons of experience, you always want to walk into any client's house the first time and ask them how they want to be addressed. Is it Mr. or Mrs.? How would you like me to talk to you so that you can be on the same page and keep a professional starting out the gate? Even if you've been there for years, you still want to maintain that professionalism throughout your care there. So even if you have been there for some time, you don't want to drop that Mr. and Mrs. Keep it going so that they realize I'm at work and this is a professional relationship that we have. I am here to help you, but I also respect what you told me even on day one. Oversharing. So sometimes we see this a lot with caregivers and clients, either starting out or sometime down the road, where you are talking a lot, maybe just because you're there for a long shift and you feel comfortable talking with this person. Maybe you've been there for a long time, or maybe it's just your first day, but the shift is long and you feel like you just want to share a little bit about yourself or your life. You don't want to be tempted to do this. You just want to make sure that you're keeping the conversation light, easy. How are you doing? How's your day going? Those type of things, instead of sharing a lot of personal information about yourself. Remember that first question that we ask ourselves: am I sharing because this is something that benefits my client, or am I sharing because it would make me feel more comfortable? Your client is not your family member. They're not your friend. They're not your therapist or anything like that. So you just want to keep it professional and light when you're speaking to them in their house. So remember that we have to do a lot of touching sometimes when we are caregivers. We help people with baths, we help people getting dressed. So you want to make sure that your touch is something that is asked for and invited, and it's something that you are also, watching to make sure that this person is okay with how you're touching them, where you're touching them, and that they know where to expect your touch. This can be definitely different for each person. Some people have been touched in, bad ways and they worry about things. There's other people that may have injuries and they want to make sure that you're not going to touch them in any certain place that may hurt them. They may be more sensitive to touch than others. So you always want to make sure that you're giving your clients a warning about, it's time for your bath. I'm going to help you with your shirt. Let me go ahead and help you, with your pants. Those type of things, so that they know what to expect, and they can also give you information of, I'm very sensitive on this side. Can you make sure you're careful? So you can respect that information and also listen for it as well. You don't want to get into the habit of, just because you have been a caregiver for a long time, assuming that every person that you're seeing is the same. Every person is different. You want to make sure that you let them use the power of their voice and their gestures, body language, and things like that to let you know what is appropriate and what they're comfortable with. Gifts, tips, and favors. I think this is probably one I hear about the most. And it usually happens when people are getting pretty comfortable with their client and they've been there for a while, and then something comes up. It could be a holiday where the client feels like they want to give you something to take home with you. It could just be a regular occurrence thing that happens over and over again. You're running late on their hours. They want you to do something. They're like, don't worry, just stay here a little bit longer. I'll give you a little bit of extra money out of pocket. Those kind of things. It seems so simple when you are there in the situation, but definitely these are the kind of things that we see twisted around a lot. Sometimes clients will make private deals with their caregivers, and it seems like, oh, that's fine. It's no big deal. But then it comes around later that maybe that client is not able to make those decisions for themselves. They have other family members that make, monetary decisions because that client might have a diagnosis or something like that that keeps them from making those decisions. Sometimes we have clients that say it is fine, I'm going to give you gas money for months and months and months, and then there's a disagreement months later, and then they bring up that the caregiver has been taking gas money from them all this time. These are the kind of things that you have to be aware of when you're a caregiver. You don't want to make monetary deals with your clients. You don't want to take tips from them. You don't want to do extra favors for them. It also comes down to when you're having these relationships with them, once you open that door, you're probably going to end up in that situation forever. Sometimes it can be a fine thing, but if you ever want to change your mind, now you've opened the door to unprofessionalism. You've said, it's okay for me to stay late, 20 minutes late, every single day. And then all of a sudden, when you want to stop doing that, it's going to become a conflict with you and your client. So try to keep things professional, keep them on schedule. Don't take any money from them or any gifts, or give them any gifts, so that there will never be a conversation that you have to have later that'll be uncomfortable for both of you. Overinvolvement. So this happens when you are working with your client for some time, and sometimes you just get into the habit of listening to the things that are going on in their house, listening to their family, discuss them, and then you start becoming more involved in this family or more involved in this client than just a professional caregiver client relationship requires. You want to be careful of this because even though you may not feel it, you are taking on the stress of this client onto you. You're taking on their family, you're taking on their health care. And being a caregiver is hard enough. It can be stressful enough for you to be in that situation just during your work hours. So you want to make sure that you're being mindful of how involved you are with the client's home. You always want to be empathetic to your client. Would never recommend to anyone to not be involved, but just make sure you are keeping that limit between professional and personal relationships. This is your workplace. You're working at this time. So you never want to cross into that line where it becomes something that is now your personal life. So you always want to try to keep things professional, even if you have been with clients for quite some time. You want to make sure that you're maintaining, a clean appearance, that you are coming to work, that your tone is appropriate. You're not using curse words or anything like that is getting, too casual with your client. Catching jokes and things like that and saying jokes that would be inappropriate, the things that you would say with your friends. You just want to make sure that you're trying to keep it professional and you're not getting too relaxed. This happens sometimes when we have had these clients for a long, long time and you're just in their home and you're thinking, this is more like my friend. But also remember, this is not your friend. This is your client. A lot of times caregivers are working for other agencies. You could get inspected at any time. Somebody could just show up out there. And if you are there, you always want to make sure that you are on your best behavior, that you're doing what you're supposed to do and not kicking your feet up too much, even though the client is giving you the signals that they don't mind. Secrets. So this is kind of something that we tell even kids today, that you want to be mindful if you tell someone that you're going to keep a secret for them. A lot of times clients will tell you these things and then they want you to keep it to yourself, especially if it has to do with health related reasons or things that are going on in their home. Well, don't tell anybody I told you, or don't tell anybody that you saw this. Keep in mind that when you say, yes, I won't tell anybody, if you do have to tell someone because of a professional reason or the agency asks you, you're automatically going to create a trust problem with your client. So never agree to keep a secret. One of the things that comes up a lot, I think, in healthcare is medications. Your client might say, I don't want to take that medication. And that is their right. They have their own rights to say, refuse meds anytime that they want to refuse meds. But if they tell you, don't tell anybody though. Now we're going into a different territory. They do have the right not to take their medication, but you should never agree not to tell their doctor or the agency that they're not taking their medication. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, Mr. Smith, but if the agency asks me or your medical professional asks me if you're taking your medication, I will have to tell them, no, you didn't take your medication, because that is your responsibility to let others know that you're working with on their healthcare team if they have taken these meds. So never agree to keep a secret such as that for them. So what do we do if we really just realize that we have, crossed the line and we are just unable to kind of figure out what to do at this point? Maybe you've watched this video and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I've been working with this client and I've been doing all of these things. So the first thing you would do is I would suggest that you talk to your supervisor, if you have one, about your concerns. Just voice it with them and just say these things have been going on and I'm not really sure where to go from here, if I am going to be able to continue with this client. Definitely maybe get a third party, HIPAA compliant third party involved so that you can discuss your concerns with them. Think about ways that you can get you and your client back on track. And that might just be a discussion. If you have allowed certain things that you would like to pull back on, see if you can discuss with them and see where their mindset is at and if they are going to be okay with that. If this is something y'all cannot return from, the last thing I would consider is that maybe you do need a reassignment. This could be the case if you have crossed your professional and private life so much that it's causing a problem in your private life. And now you definitely need to roll back on how much you've given to this client, either mentally or physically, things like that. I'm in the business of long-term care myself. I like to see people last a long time, but I also know how stressful being a caregiver can be. So you do have to kind of think of those things for yourself and make a decision. So we got a couple of scenarios at the end. So Anne has been a caregiver for 2 years. She visits her client 5 days a week in the morning from 9 a.m. to 12. When she arrives at her client on Friday, the client tells her that next week she's going to have a procedure and she's going to need some extra help for 3 weeks. She tells Anne that she will pay her cash to let her stay later and give her gas money to run some extra errands while she's recovering. The client tells Anne that she will not tell the agency. Well, she asks Anne not to tell her agency. So what should she do in this situation? So one thing that you have to look for in here is number one, this is overinvolvement. So she's being asked to see this client off schedule. Once you start doing that, you're definitely opening a door where the client may ask you additional favors on your personal time. Once you say it's okay for me to see you off schedule, then you're kind of opening a little door for that client to kind of call you when you're not really working, for them to, kind of bother you on your personal time. So you want to be aware of that. When you say yes to that, you might be opening that window. The other thing is secrets. The client came right out and told Anne, hey, don't tell your agency about this. They don't need to know. So that's another thing that you want to be aware of. Gifts, tips, and personal favors is the last one. Anytime you're dealing with money with your client, it is a mistake. I can't say that enough times. All it takes is for a misunderstanding to happen, for you to feel like you didn't get paid what you thought you were supposed to get paid, or for this client to think that you took more money and didn't do what you were supposed to do, for this to turn into a very bad situation. So never accept money, don't accept tips, don't do personal favors, because it wounds both parties. The client could be upset about something they feel like you didn't do, and you could be upset because you feel like I didn't get paid for the work that I did. So definitely in these situations, you should be saying no to any extras. So scenario 2, Mark is a caregiver and he's been one for 12 years. He gets a new assignment to a client that is 40 hours a week. On his first day, he meets the client and introduces himself. Hello, Joe. I am Mark. Your old caregiver quit. Let's get started with your bath right off. When Mark moves to the bed to help the client with the clothes, the client raises his hands to stop him. So what do you think Mark did wrong? So one thing is he kind of came right in off the bat and called him Joe. So nicknames and endearments. We always want to start off when we're meeting our clients is, hi, my name is, so that you can let them know what you would prefer to be called. Right from the entrance, just go ahead and let them know whatever your name is. If you have a nickname that you like to be preferred, like, Cece or something, then go ahead and say, hey, you can call me Cece. But then ask them, what would you like to be called? So that y'all are on the right page about greetings and how you're going to address this client while you're there working. The other thing is touch. He kind of said, let's get started with your bath, and he is reaching in. What he should be saying is it okay for us to start first with your bath and getting your linens changed? Are you ready for that? Can we go ahead and do this? It should always be a question when you're moving in to touch someone, and you should always be invited to come into their personal space, whether that is a gesture of invitation or permission before moving in. So even though Mark has been doing this for 12 years, he's assuming with his experience, he knows what he's doing, and this client should automatically trust him. But that's not necessarily true. So we always need to make sure that we are establishing that trust and rapport from the start, and letting that client give us the clearance to move in and also come into their space. So that is the last of the video. Just some final tips. Just maintaining those boundaries as caregivers will help you reduce your own stress and promote healthy relationships for you and your client. You always want to recognize how to stay in balance as a caregiver. It is so important. It is going to protect you from having misconduct, from misunderstandings. If you have any questions about this, feel free to leave some comments or reach out to us at the office. But I hope these tips have helped you moving forward as a caregiver in your career.